What's up, you scholars of enlightenment? Welcome back to another tech roundup. I'm joined, as usual, by tech guru and real life James Bond Q, Ramsey Faragher. Ramsey, how are you getting on? How was Christmas?
Good, thanks. I grew this beard,
Yes.
so I look nothing like my picture there. So I'll have to try and shave it off the next time.
Was that a James Webb 6 months of terror stress beard, or
Just keeping me warm in
just
these
keeping
cold
you?
winter months.
It has turned cold recently. So today we're going to be covering all of the recent tech news. We're going to be talking about NFTs and the MetaVerse, hopefully, the Consumer Electronics Show, which is underway at the moment, potentially why you shouldn't go to Mars if we have time, and one of the interesting stories that's come out very, very recently, Ramsey, and we might want to cover this first, is we talked about AirTags, Apple AirTags, a little while ago on the show, and it seems that actually, if we go to this article from the Metro, a model has been stalked home using her AirTag. Now, how can we stop this happening? First of all, what are AirTags designed to do? And how can we protect ourselves from being stalked home in this way?
Yeah, so these are little devices that Apple started selling last year, which are about this big, size of a coin cell battery. So little keyring type size device that are designed for you to find lost keys or a lost wallet or any item you like. And um, unfortunately, just like any tracking system that's designed for nice things like finding lost keys, people will always be, looking to use them for nefarious purposes. And yeah, this lady who's a model got a notification on her iPhone that there was an AirTag that was not hers that was moving with her, which is Apple's kind of way of trying to stop this thing from happening. And she checked her pockets and found that someone had indeed slipped one of these things into her coat when she was in a bar. And by the time she'd found out she was at home, she was worried that the person would now know where she lived, which is true actually, by how they're designed. She was upset by this, and it's made some headlines today in the Metro. And yeah, the question of how you can try to not be tracked by these. So the way they work is that they're constantly squeaking a little Bluetooth message out, and other phones in the environment that hear that message will log the position on a map. So if it's your keys that are lost, when someone walks past your keys that are falling down that wall or whatever, when they walk past, appear on a map that it communicated with your AirTag on your keys. That's where that phone was at the time, and you can go back and find your keys. So while Apple have put some steps in place to try to prevent this sort of thing from happening, so if an AirTag is moving with another phone, it will report to that phone. It will alert it that an AirTag is moving with it. And after a few days, they start beeping, so you can try to locate them as well. But the only ways to really stop yourself being stalked by them is install an app on your phone that will search for them, either on an Android phone or an Apple phone. And if you were being particularly worried that you thought someone was stalking you, you would basically have to keep firing this app up to see if there's any lost AirTags near you regularly. The most extreme thing is that Bluetooth has a maximum range of about 100 meters in the absolute open conditions, normally a bit less than that. So the only really extreme confident way to make sure you're not being tracked by this technology is to stay more than 100 meters away from anyone else, which sounds pretty good to me.
Extreme social distancing, or go live in the very deep countryside. So yeah, it is a little bit of a concerning story. We did sort of touch on this, and this was brought up by experts as a potential problem with this technology. It seems that it has been used in this way, or potentially has been used in this way. And I guess this is a situation where when we invent any sort of technology which is useful for finding lost things or for any other function, people will find nefarious purposes for it. I think she was obviously very unhappy. I think she took to Instagram to complain to Apple that this was obviously something that can happen. What do you think about the sort of pros and cons of this technology?
Well, it's been designed for a good purpose, but this is the challenge, right? For it to be really, really good at helping you find your lost keys, it has to work in all sorts of environments and be this magic device that can appear with a little dot anywhere on a map. And so you can't win, it's but by being a really, really useful tool for finding things that have been lost by good people, it can also be used to find things that have been lost or searching for bad people. I think the key difference between this and other technologies in the past that is making it hit the headlines is for many years it's been possible to buy similar little Bluetooth trackers from a company called Tile and other companies, but they simply have never had the kind of reach and the part of the massive ecosystem that the AirTags are. So every single iPhone can search for AirTags, but it's not the case that every single iPhone searches for the Tile tags. It's only people who install the Tile tag on their phone because they themselves own a Tile tag. So the kind of network for one technology is much greater than another. And traditionally, if you wanted to stalk a model, you might buy a GPS tracker with a cellular connection. So something that's kind of like a tiny little mobile phone, basically, that's just a SIM card, a cellular connection, a GPS chip, and it keeps pinging the GPS signal over the cellular network. And these things, you can Google and go and find these things on the internet, and they're typically, like £150, something like that. And the battery might last a week, whereas AirTags are £30 and the battery lasts for years. So you've just got a different scale of kind of, it's kind of a double whammy that these things are much better tracking devices than some of the previous methods that you'd have used before the AirTag came along.
And also much more available to a wider market, I guess, which is always going to include some people who want to ruin it for everyone, I guess.
Yeah, and Apple have put some things in place to try to prevent this. So, as I said, if a tag is detected as moving with another iPhone that isn't the one registered to that tag, it will warn the iPhone that there seems to be a tag moving with you. You then still have to go find that tag. So this lady found it in a pocket of her coat, but there have been problems in the States where cars are being stolen by people putting an AirTag in someone else's car and then, choosing the opportunity to go and steal that car. And knowing that there's just an AirTag somewhere in your car doesn't really help you. It's not quite the same thing searching your left pocket, searching your right pocket, I found it, versus trying to figure out where someone might have hidden an AirTag in your entire car, inside and outside.
It's like one of those X-Files scenes where, they're ripping the entire apartment to pieces, trying to find the bug that could be in the lamp or in the exhaust or under the chair or wherever it might be. By the time you've ripped the car apart looking for it, it might not be a car anymore.
No, and there's plenty of nooks and crannies you can shove a coin cell sized object into in a car where they just fall inside and you'd have no hope of getting it back out again. So it's a tricky problem. And one of the other things that Apple have built in to try to stop this is that after a few days, a lost AirTag starts beeping. But if you sort of Google this problem, you'll find that there's a handy little YouTube video that you can find very, very easily that shows you how to break into your AirTag with a little razor blade and disable the speaker. So it's not that hard to circumvent the beeping AirTag if you wanted to plant one on somebody and not have it beep. So it's going to be a bit of an ongoing problem, this one, as this technology starts to become more and more prevalent.
Fair enough. Makes sense. And just while we're on that sort of, we usually talk about the positives of technology and the new tech that's coming down the pipe. But another negative story, maybe to put these together, package them together, is this story I saw 28th of December. It was Alexa tells 10-year-old girl to touch live plug with penny. So the story behind this is that some young girls, and I think with their mum, were doing some challenges, some physical challenges where they had to, stand on their head or lift one leg above the other or whatever it might be, very dull stuff. And they asked Alexa for another of these challenges. So obviously you have the situation where you go, Alexa, it beeps, and you ask it some question. It gives you some information from the internet. They asked for another challenge, and it suggested that they put a plug halfway into the socket and then touch a coin to the live prongs. Now, obviously, that's not a very good idea to do. You will get electrocuted. But apparently, this is the penny challenge, which has been circulating on the internet because obviously it has for the last year. Now, the point with this is obviously it's something very stupid that you don't want to do. But in terms of a tech point, how is Alexa trained? Because it seems like it's going away, getting information off the internet. And if the information on a certain topic is garbage, you're going to get garbage in, garbage out. So how do they make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen with a piece of technology like Alexa?
Yeah, this is really hard because all of these machine learning tools that we're starting to place more and more faith into, you've got to kind of consider them, while they seem very smart, to basically be as naive and trusting as a toddler is, right?
Yeah.
And we saw a really famous example where Microsoft put a chatbot connected directly up to Twitter, and it was going to learn how to converse, and it however people talked to it on Twitter, that's how it built up its understanding of how you should talk to other people. And within a couple of days, this thing was racist,
became the
sexist,
worst person in the world. Like within,
yeah, it was just tweeting the most offensive stuff, and it's because unfortunately, there's lots of people on Twitter that find it funny to swear at a machine learning tool, so that it will swear back at them. And this is a similar example where basically you ask an innocent question to Alexa, and so Alexa just goes and takes some top hits from the internet at the moment on challenges. And as you said, there have been some really stupid viral things going on with TikTok and other.
I remember what was it? The Tide Pod challenge, where they were swallowing those washing machine tablets and seeing if it killed you. And I think a couple of people either died or had very sort of serious illness from that. So there's always these silly challenges that go around.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, to answer your question on how they can protect against it and stuff, I mean, the simplest, quickest way that they'll be applying here to nip these things in the bud straight away is adding these things to blacklists. So as soon as it's reported, it goes on a blacklist. And so next time, Alexa will do its thing, check the internet, take some top hits, check against the blacklist. And if it's on the blacklist, it drops further down the list. And Alexa doesn't understand anything about that at all. It's a really simple piece of programming. But the sort of longer term ideal is basically training knowledge into neural networks on a much greater understanding as to, what's dangerous and what's safe to be advising people to do. But that's just such a massive piece of work beyond these simple tasks of searching the internet and giving answers back. But it's one of the big, huge open questions about neural networks as we start using them for more and more things. You can train them very quickly to appear to be really smart.
Yeah.
And actually, they're just doing really dumb pattern matching.
Yeah.
And intelligence of crowds. And the problem is, if you expose them to a particularly dumb crowd, then you're going to get told to shove a penny in your electrical socket.
Yeah, it's. I guess this is always. They say they ran or fixed the error, quote unquote. Now it seems to me that it wasn't actually as much an error as much as a sort of feature of the way that it's trained, right? So there is a propensity for this to happen again, and then they'll just have to blacklist it again. Now, as you say, most of the time people are behaving vaguely sensibly. The top hits on things will be, on a challenge will be, the ice bucket challenge or whatever it might be, which is vaguely sensible. But if it does so happen every now and again that there's a fluctuation out, which is incredibly unreasonable or dangerous, it's going to pick that up again. So it's constantly sort of monitoring that there does need to be, as you said, sort of some sort of human influence still there to make sure that those extremes are chopped off as soon as possible.
Yeah, and you could extend the blacklist concept to a big list of, like, if this word is in this, then simply don't use that one. So, electricity, plug socket, water, you could start to build up that kind of thing as well as a next step. But it's most likely that these sorts of things occur so infrequently that they just assume someone will report it very quickly, and they'll use the intelligence of the real neural networks in order to keep the artificial ones from killing people.
Sounds fair enough. So that's Skynet on the rise over the Christmas holidays. So no bueno, not good. Now another thing that's going on. So hot off the press, and this is literally, I believe it's still going on now, isn't it? As we speak, is CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. So that'll help us to cleanse the palate a little bit. And Ramsey, as a tech aficionado, you've been keeping an eye on this Consumer Electronics Show this week. So first of all, what is it, and what's going on? What's the big deal?
Yes, it's a huge event, the first week of the year, every year over in Las Vegas. Traditionally it would have been an even bigger affair than it is nowadays. But COVID, of course, restricts. It's the reason I'm not there. I'm often there, actually. The last few years I've been over there. Before the internet, it was a really, really, really big, important thing, because it was the big trade show where you'd go and see all of the companies unveiling their new TVs and their new VHSs and all these things that we had before the internet. But of course, nowadays, because of the internet, it's much easier for everyone to keep on top of the latest and greatest things coming out in consumer electronics. But everyone still loves going to CES, and it's certainly where all the announcements are made every year. The exception of people like Apple and Google, who have their own particular events through the year, where they have their own big unveilings of everything. Many companies use CES to unveil their big news every year. So Sony unveiled some plans for an electric car, for example. There's been some interesting stuff that Sony came out with. I think we're going to talk about at least one of them.
Yeah.
And of course, everyone was gearing up for MetaVerse launches and NFT. And I think if I was there, I'd be walking around with my own little bingo card, seeing just how many times I see NFT and MetaVerse on people's stands. Blockchain, there we go, front and center. So yes, blockchain is very much linked into NFT. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute.
So I definitely want to come on to those if we have some time after we've after we've looked at these, because what I would like to cover with you here and share with the viewers is some of the best and also maybe some of the weirdest things. So if we cover like the 3 to 5 sort of interesting, reasonable, sensible innovations that have come out or that you've seen, and then maybe a few of the ones that you never knew you needed, but maybe you really do. So we've been keeping an eye on this, and Wired has got a nice sort of article of some of the best things out of CES. And the first one that you came across was this Eco Remote, which is apparently the best in home entertainment. So what have we got going on here with this Eco Remote, and why do you think it's an interesting innovation?
Yeah, this is quite nice. It's one of those things that is really overdue. People have been talking about doing this for a long time in different guises. So this is a remote control that never needs batteries, which is quite cool, isn't it?
That's always good, because fiddling around for batteries for anything is just awful. Like, nobody likes doing it.
And this is one of the interesting things about why this is actually so simple. It's probably one of the best examples where you can have parasitic charging and never need batteries. So the idea here is that it's probably got it's got a capacitor inside it instead of batteries, and it's got ways of charging that capacitor up. And it uses pointing your remote at the TV and changing channel and changing volume and stuff uses a tiny, 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 tiny amount of energy. I mean, you know, the AA batteries or the AAA batteries in your remote, as you know, can last like 10 years, right? Yeah. And what these remotes are going to do is scavenge that energy to charge up that capacitor from the lights in your home and the Wi-Fi access point in your home. So they've got little solar cells, and they've got fundamentally just a radio. But all of the energy that's coming in when the Wi-Fi waves that are supposed to be heading off to your laptop or your phone or your smart TV to serve them with the internet pass through your remote. When the Wi-Fi signals hit the antenna inside the remote, excite the movement of the electrons. That voltage that's normally used to carry messages on and off the antenna, that tiny little voltage that's generated is used to kick just a little bit more charge into that capacitor, and that's all it's doing. And
so we're not talking about massive carbon savings here, like planet saving technology. We're talking about more about the convenience of never having to change that battery. It's a kind of self-contained unit. I think they said they could avoid 99 million discarded batteries over 7 years. So that's more the draw. The convenience and saving these horrible batteries going into landfill and things like this is the conservation angle, rather than massive CO2 savings, because it's a tiny little amperage that we need for this.
Yeah, and as I said, this is the nicest place to start, because controllers need such little amount of energy so infrequently, basically. And there's been a nice thing I saw in the past that didn't really take off, but it was a neat idea. There was a little startup that made AA-sized batteries, but what they were was a magnet and a coil and a capacitor. So you could click these things that were AA sized inside a remote. And what you would do is just shake the remote for a couple of seconds every time you wanted to use it, and then it would have enough charge for whatever, like 20 seconds worth of channel flicking. And that never really took off. But this is, this requires zero efforts, right? Other than basically making sure you don't keep your remote in a locked drawer metal box in between uses. As long as it sits in view of your lights and your daylight, and there's a Wi-Fi access point in the house, then you're charging the capacitor inside it all the time.
I remember there was I'm always a little bit skeptical about these sort of parasitic energy saving ideas, because when I worked for the low carbon engineering consultancy between my undergrad and my PhD, there was always people sending these things in, and the most bizarre ones you've ever seen in your life. So piezoelectric speed bumps, for example, right? So like, the car goes over the speed bump pushes down a little bit into the earth, you get a little bit of charge. Of course, the person hasn't realized that energy has to come from somewhere. It's coming from the car, right? Which is just burning petrol. Like, it's now a little bit harder for the car to go. So really all you've done is make the car do a little bit more work, which is obviously fossil fuels. We had somebody suggest water wheels on toilet flushes, which I guess is, maybe something there, but it wasn't you're not producing much energy. So you flush the toilet, goes down, there's a little hydroelectric wheel there to make a little bit of charge. But most of the suggestions that they were coming up with was breaking the conservation of energy, or not accounting for the kind of upstream energy chain. Here, I guess, because they're not really worried about the CO2 savings, it's not a big deal. It's more about convenience. But you would be essentially sapping energy from the Wi-Fi signal, which, again, if you trace it all the way back, comes from some coal-fired power station. So we're not talking about massive CO2 savings here. It's convenience, not having to chuck these batteries into landfill every now and again, which is...
And it's certainly the case. There's a few things, right? So the components going inside these devices are now cheap enough for this to be practical and usable, right? So you wouldn't have done this 20 years ago because the capacitor cost would have been high, the cost of the solar cells would have been too high, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that aspect of simply, the cost of the components means it's worth doing. But also everything you just described there on the car or flushing the toilet, you're removing, as you said, you're like removing utility from something else, or you're either having to push the throttle pedal more on the car to climb the car over the piezoelectric speed bump, or you're potentially making a more frustrating to use toilet if it's not as good at flushing stuff away anymore, because
slowly down the toilet.
Yeah. And also those uses are going to try and push energy into the grid. And you're talking about like a phenomenally small amount of energy probably, and it just doesn't make a dent on like boosting the grid. Whereas this is a contained little ecosystem. Its job is to change channels on your TV. And it truly is parasitic and a useful recovery, because the Wi-Fi energy, your remote taking a little bit of energy from the Wi-Fi as it passes through the remote is not impacting at all the performance of your laptop or your phone in a completely different direction somewhere else in the house. Similarly, obviously the light energy bouncing around in your room, the shadow cast by your remote never causes you a problem, right? So it really is a good neat example of parasitic energy for me.
I'm sure you've told me about the suggestion of, I think it was piezoelectric pavements with people just like walking on them. So basically turning human motion into a treadmill to sort of try and power cities. I'm sure people have tried these or suggested these kind of things over and over again. The next one that came up, which we both found very interesting. So we've obviously got a lot of very smart stuff going on in space with James Webb and DART and things like this. There was a best in sustainability, which was this Tide. I assume that's Tide Pods people again working with NASA. Yep. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how consumer this is, but I know space travel is becoming more commercial. So maybe it is consumer electronics and such here. But they've come up with a washing powder that you could use in space, hopefully, and they're putting this forward for tests with NASA. So, Ramsey, do you want to explain for the people out there what's going on with this?
Yeah, so it's always been very difficult to wash clothes in the International Space Station because they have to recycle all that water. So the astronauts' excretions are cleansed very carefully, and they're drinking all their wee the next day, basically. And
so you're not allowed to wash your clothes because you'd be wasting half the water that they need to drink in this closed system. So it's all a sort of
the problem
recycling
is you put traditional detergents in that precious water on ISS, and the scrubbers that can deal with wee and get you clean water out the other side, they can't deal with like removing the horrible chemicals that make up non-ionic surfactants that are used to pull grease off stuff. And so, Tide have clearly been working on this interesting problem of something that can do the chemistry to remove sweat and stains and dirt from fabric, but not change the water in such a way that the traditional means on ISS of getting you back clean H2O can't be used. So they've managed to kind of solve that problem. So it's going to be less smelly on the ISS going forward, which is great news for everybody.
I was going to say, all I could think of was that Tim Peake absolutely stinking on the ISS. It's sort of like one of these gap year places where you go out into the wilds and you can never wash your clothes and you just end up sweating and smelling and wearing the same clothes over and over again.
It's one of these interesting, like not very glamorous things about these things that you think really cool, like being an astronaut or being a submariner.
Yeah.
And in reality, both of those environments stink, absolutely stink. And of course, that's not in The Hunt for Red October. Yeah. I can't remember the name of the character now, but Jack Ryan, doesn't get straight on the sub and goes, "Oh God, you guys
reeks in here.
Need a shower." That's not in the script, but it's the truth. So it could be useful beyond ISS as well. It could be useful in some other more terrestrial or subterranean applications as well.
Yes. So they're doing this this test with NASA at the ISS, and the extension of that, as you say, is if you could use this on Earth, maybe you can get more water recycling, using less water for doing our washing and such like this. Particularly useful in places that struggle to get a lot of clean water. Maybe places out in rural Africa and places like this, where you could essentially harvest more grey water, recycle water, use it again. So it's a very interesting piece of chemistry, and we'll have to keep an eye on how that goes. But hopefully, that will come off, and that's tied in collaboration with NASA. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. The third one that came out for best. Now, I don't know about best. You're going to have to sell this one to me a little bit more, because to me it comes off really as a gimmick. So if you were selling this to me, Ramsey, this came in the best PC section. This has been coming up for a few years now. It comes around and then it doesn't work and the screen bleeds and it breaks. This is this idea of foldable PCs with foldable screens. So you can fold these things up to the size of a phone. You have a little phone size thing. You get to work, you unfold them. You can have a huge desktop, plug a keyboard and mouse into it, and you have a desktop computer now. You rip it off the stand as you want to go. You now have a touch screen tablet. So it's essentially putting all of these packages into one. Why should we be bothered about these foldable things? Why is it more than just a gimmick in your in your mind?
So it's certainly one of those things that a lot of big names are all really pushing for this technology. They really have a lot of faith that consumers do want this. People want to be able to completely protect their screens of their phones in their pockets and stuff, and not have little bits of dirt and jangling keys and stuff scratching their screen. And you've got the benefits, as you can see in this example here, of much bigger things than smartphones as well, being folded away. There's a fantasy of unrolling, so not just folding, but being able to actually like pull down like a pair of blinds, a massive screen, projector screen style in like meeting rooms and stuff. So there's always been lots of excitement around it. And as you said, we had a bit of a false start. I think it was Samsung that unveiled the first kind of folding phone a few years ago, and basically had to pull it because they were getting cracked and damaged really quickly. But it seems to be the case that a lot of these problems have been solved now. And there's a rumor that, an iPhone in 2 or 3 years is going to be slated to be a folding phone as well. Just a rumor. But I think the interesting thing is, what's the science behind these, right? How come we can do this? So basically, traditionally, LCD and LED displays were built on silicon, a very stiff material, and typically had glass bonded on the fronts to be the nice shiny surface. And so that's just not flexible. Silicon screens not flexible, and that was that. But what these are made of is OLED, which is basically organic LEDs. It's plastic in effect. So we've had OLED technology for well over 10 years now, and it's just a matter of all of the improvements and perfections of getting it thinner and thinner and more robust. So we're now at a point where these plastic electronics can be produced incredibly thinly, so that they are very malleable. They can fold very easily or roll, without loss of performance in the refresh rate, the brightness, the color depth, all this stuff. And so it's been a series of improvements over many years, in the same way that the processors in our laptops and phones are forever getting faster and smaller and lower power draw. This screen technology has been getting thinner and thinner and thinner with no other sacrifices, to the point where we've now got really flexible, really good displays. So it's the culmination of like 10 years of work in this area. I think these will be here for a while. I don't know if they'll be the true thing that we all have forever now, that all phones will be folding, but there's so much effort gone into them. I think we're going to see lots more folding and rolling displays over the next 5 years.
I do think that's probably like the way that people would want to see them, that a screen wrapped around a ball or into some weird shape or whatever it might be would be the sort of application that people are interested in. I don't know, it just feels to me like a little bit of a gimmick. Have a phone, I do a bit of, scroll my phone, watch a video while I get to work, and then my computer is there. Maybe I'm being a Philistine. Maybe once I had this thing, I would realize that I wanted all these different sizes. But we'll
don't forget as well. Don't forget as well, one of the biggest problems that people suffer with phones and sometimes laptops and tabs is a smashed screen, right? From dropping it. So if you've got an all plastic flexible display that can't shatter, then you're going to solve that problem for a lot of your users.
That's fair. So we'll have to keep an eye on this and where it goes. The one more that came back, which I really liked, and you shared this with me, was this car that can change color. So do you want to briefly explain what's going on here?
There's definitely a real life Q joke in here somewhere for sure.
Exactly. So, I'd set you up here. Come on.
It's really cool. So yeah, BMW have managed to put electronic ink panels over the entire car. So the same technology that's in things like the sort of Amazon e-readers and these other things that have been around for a long time now to give you really, really long battery ebooks. It's that same principle. So the panels of the car can be charged with an electric charge such that the ink that's in there can either move away from or towards the surface. And so pull all the ink away from the surface, it's white. Pull it all the way to the top, it's black. and they can make shades of grey and have different patterns. So it's a cool gimmick. You'd be concerned about how many criminals.
I was going to say we're chasing a white SUV, and then it just changes to black, and suddenly it's disappeared off the radar.
Indeed, and it's cool to see this. It'd be really interesting to understand just how practical this could be, because you do sometimes get some really interesting things at CES on cars, and they're just purely fun concept things that they'd never actually take them to production. So whether this is practical in terms of if someone just simply pushes with their thumb on the door, does the entire thing crack and break? There's all of those things to drill into on this. It might just be a bit of fun for CES 2020.
What was the one he had in James Bond, where he had little micro cameras on one side that projected everything that was on the other side, so made it invisible, basically?
Yeah,
you remember that one?
I think I can't remember which film it was, but certainly the one that's in my mind as being the least realistic.
Yes, the one with the guy with the diamonds in his face and the Koreans.
Yeah, exactly. That was
Die Another Day.
Cameras,
I can't remember.
And project one of them. That was indeed cameras projecting onto screens to make the car invisible, in air quotes. One of the interesting things I've seen everyone reporting on this, which is a total science misnomer, is trying to find the problem that this solves. And people keep citing, isn't it great that you could come back to your car on a hot day, and because you've set it to white instead of black, it's not as hot inside, which is utter garbage. That's not that the color of the car is not the reason why you have the greenhouse effect inside your car when you go and get back in it. It's the greenhouse part of the car and all those glass windows that are the problem.
Fair enough. So these are some of the ones that we really like. Some of the coolest innovations. Some that are very, very useful. I want to change it up a little bit and go for the ones that you never knew you needed but are incredibly useful. So this is a video by Automate Your Life. So I won't just steal all of his stuff, but one of them you flagged up.
This guy definitely got the award though for talking about the most products inside 10 minutes 22 seconds.
It does.
I've never seen anything like it before.
No, I will link this down in the description. He does a lot of these funky products. So I'll just play a little clip, Ramsey, and then if you could, and then I'll tell you what's going on. You can jump in.
Get that water just right. You remember that your morning is busy. To brush your teeth with your new IO10 from Oral-B, and it tells you that you've been doing better with your brushing, and it makes sure that you don't overbrush or hurt your gums by pressing a little too hard. You use your new Kohler.
So we've got this Oral-B IO10 or something. So this is a smart toothbrush, and basically what it does is it tells you whether you've been brushing too hard, how well you've done. But the interesting thing is when you put it back on the stand, not only does it charge itself, but it syncs up to your phone to give you a sort of running explanation of how good your brushing is. You going to be buying one of these?
No, I don't think so. But it's a beautiful example of the sorts of things you do see at CES. I love going around looking for the solutions, desperately trying to find a problem. So I can't imagine what proportion of people it is that have been, damaging their faces by brushing so hard that they are stripping the enamel from their teeth. I would have thought that the fact that for decades we've had bristles made of a soft, bendy material, it kind of is a bit of a self-solving problem, I would have thought.
So there is two things on this. One of them is, like you said, a lot of these stranger ones seem to be, as you say, a solution in search of a problem. And then there's also a lot of sort of a narrative of everything needs to be uploaded to your phone nowadays to see what's going on. Whether it's your dog walking around or, how many people walk past your house or whatever it is, seems to be that everything needs to get some sort of external sensor and onto your phone seems to be a big push of late. Yeah,
exactly. And some things like this as well, just because when you do know what some of the problems are, you just think, why don't they actually go after the problems? So a lot of oral hygiene problems are because people don't floss. Like everyone's brushing just fine. It's that no one can be bothered flossing. And that's actually where they should be concentrating. It should be bullying you with on your phone going, have you flossed today? I don't think you flossed. So
the next one I want to show you is this one. So if I jump to 330, you can, I don't know if you're getting the sound, but you can definitely see what's going on with this one.
Door with its
is this Bluetooth
collar
Bluetooth
tag
doggy?
on, and that means Rover's outside taking care of business right away. The good
Harking
news,
back to our iTag problems.
Yes. So the idea here is you clip on a little Bluetooth sort of receiver onto your dog's collar, and when it goes to the door obviously senses that this tag has come near. The dog wants to go out to do its ones and twos, and the door opens so that the dog can walk out without you having to do anything. So thoughts here?
Yeah, I'd love to be a rich enough person for this to be a problem I need solving. And
have you got a dog?
No, not that I know of, but no. The thing is, Bluetooth has always been a bit of a it's had a bit of a bad reputation in the industry. It's a lot better now. We're on like Bluetooth version 5 now, but I don't know if you remember those really early days of like little Bluetooth earpieces that you'd wear in your ear, and feature phones where just about one of the only things that you could do that was interesting was share a contact between two phones over Bluetooth. And Bluetooth connectivity and its reliability has historically always been really, really bad. And a few years ago, you certainly would not have trusted Bluetooth to keep your pet safe. I mean, you've paused this at a beautiful moment, but you wouldn't want the door to start closing at that moment.
Yes.
Because the Bluetooth connection had gone and the door was confident the dog was now much further away than it really was. But they are the sorts of traditional problems of Bluetooth, that Bluetooth devices can think they're much further away than they really are, or vice versa, or lose connection when they're really close, and so on. So
we don't see it close behind the dog in this video. So, you know, you go out, your dog wants to go out, and it just leaves your door open for the whole time. You got me thinking with the iTag stalking one. If you really wanted to get into someone's house, you just get this little tag onto the dog, and you know, put this in there. They wander out to do their business, and in you go into the house. I'm sure there's some ways you could misuse this thing.
Point actually. Well, it's a very good point. One of the challenges with these sorts of technologies, as we get at the moment with keyless entry cars, is the risk of a replay attack. So someone identifying this person as having more money than sense based on buying this thing, might have lots of interesting things in their house to nick. If you potentially you could come close to this and basically record the message that's being broadcast between those two things, and then replay it later and get the door to open. As long as you design your systems with replay attacks in mind, you can protect against this. But as we see with keyless entry in cars, these systems have not always been designed to stop a record and replay attack from giving you entry to something.
The odd ones are always the pet ones, by the way. I'll put these two together. So this one is a training device called Fluent Pet. So I'll just play this a second.
Fluent Pet hex tiles.
You're going to have to talk me through this one.
Old Rover asked to go for a walk by pressing the button that means that, and you want to make sure that the training continues to go well and he continues to learn new words. So
basically this is called Fluent Pet, and it's got 6 buttons. And essentially, if the dog wants food, it learns to click a particular button. If it wants to go for a poo, it clicks another button. So essentially, it's just Skinnerbox learning a dog. But surely you can just sort of do that with, you know, the dog goes and scratches the door, and that's I want to go out. Like, again, seems like a solution in search of a problem. Like, obviously, the dog can't communicate. You just know it wants something usually. And to be fair, those things always seem to be, I want to go to the toilet, I want you to feed me, or I want to go for a walk. Like, what else does a dog What else does a dog want?
Yeah,
I want you
exactly.
to
I
pet
mean,
me.
I've never owned a dog, but being the owner of small children, I I I can imagine how, just like when my 6-year-old cries in different ways or thumps its hand in a certain way, you can tell whether it's a nappy problem, a milk problem, or a boredom problem. I would have thought most good dog owners, as you say, know when walkies or feeding. You can probably generally smell when there's a poo problem with a dog.
Yes,
So
fair. The final one I came across, which I thought you might find this interesting because you're a tech guy in a tech business and you got some employees. So this was smart windows. So essentially, you can have an office, very open plan. You got a meeting room which has got all glass, and then you can run a current through it, and you can change this.
Who's on the inside and also tell you what is taking place in the room.
You can change this room to essentially an opaque business meeting room where you don't have people looking in. Thoughts about this? Would you like these in your offices?
yeah, definitely very cool. And these have been, again, just like that folding screen example we talked earlier. These have been on the radar and on the list for many years now as being something that it's well established that lots of people will want this in their working spaces. And it's the same, as you just said, it's OLED technology. It's the same plastic printable electronic tech that's been getting thinner, cheaper, brighter, better, and more resilient, because you're not relying on very stiff substrates under glass. So yeah, I think it's cool. We'll definitely have this in my office for sure.
So those are the best and some of the weirdest ones we've seen this week. How's your time? Because I wanted to get into a little bit on NFTs and MetaVerse if you got a little bit of time.
Yeah, we can go a bit further on. I warn you that you're standing between me and me eating something for dinner.
Well,
so,
we'll be done. We'll be done by 8 at the very, very latest, right? So and before then, because I am also ready for my dinner. So people going on about the metaverse, right? So we've had this for a little bit of time now. People going on about the metaverse without us really seemingly knowing exactly what it is. So it seems to very loosely be a kind of series of virtual world building platforms on the internet where you can do business, you can play games, you can have experiences in VR, not in real life. Basically, it's basically the Matrix. That's what I kind of take out of it, and it leans very heavily on VR, and you can do a lot of tasks in this, even sort of the most mundane tasks. There's one here where you got an example of people just kind of doing their groceries like in a virtual reality world. Now, why you would want to do this, I don't really know. Just picking up your wine rather than just buying it, click and collect.
So no need to wait for an ID check.
I don't know, but the idea is you could do much more interesting things that people can't visit the Grand Canyon in real life, but they can visit it in, VR on the metaverse. And this is obviously something that's been taken extremely seriously. You have Samsung presenting their My House concept at CES, and there certainly seem to be people who are really, really putting a lot of money into this and really speculating hard. So this was a story that you mentioned to me earlier this week, that people are buying up already. Really hard speculation, but buying up plots of land and real estate essentially in the metaverse. So what have you seen?
And we should just add that it's not Fauci that's bought property next to Snoop Dogg.
I don't know.
$500,000. That appears to be an advert, but that would be one hell of a scoop for you,
That
Sam.
would be very interesting. So what's going on here? Why are people doing this? And talk us through this example with Snoop Dogg of all people in the tech industry.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And it's another step in this really interesting thing that's been going on from going right back to like Bitcoin and everyone's uncertainty about whether Bitcoin is just a huge hype or a great idea or a terrible thing and so on. People are starting to talk about what they're calling Web 3.0, like the next way that we will use the internet. And there's all sorts of aspects to that, and I think one of them is definitely going to be this concept of a metaverse. And most people heard about it first when Facebook changed their name to Meta, and that just shows how much Facebook are really committing to this idea that we will cease to use this kind of way of interacting with people. So that's your real wall behind you in your real life. And mine's blurry because it's constantly messy. But yeah, the idea is that soon we will be doing this with VR headsets on, and there won't be cameras pointing at us, and you'll be hosting like avatars of you and me.
Yeah.
Like we'd have been on the ISS space station when we were talking about Tide, and we'd have been walking around CES when we were talking about CES. In kind of, as you say, like a Matrix style CGI version of ourselves walking around CGI environments. And to be frank, everything at the moment is still looking a bit crap. Let's be honest, it's still not looking that amazing right now. It's still looking a bit like Second Life, if you remember that, which was really the beginnings of this concept of a metaverse. And the thing that always confuses me is that every film that you've got, you mentioned the Matrix, but it's like Ready Player One. There's a bunch of films that have like touched on the idea of humans simply being kind of locked into a small box and actually just changing their sensory inputs through having a headset on or whatever. And in all of those films, it's a horrible dystopian mess. And yet rich people running big companies have gone, yeah, let's do it.
It never comes off well, does it? Inception or Matrix or whatever it might be, where you've got these sort of second levels of reality. It never always seems to kind of detract from the actual lived experience. But we'll have to kind of see that. And there's hell of a lot of people getting involved. So this one, there's even Snoop Dogg developing his own metaverse. So this is called Snoopverse, which I guess that took him ages to come up with. For those who are into that type of thing, sounds like hell on earth to me personally, but you know, there we go. And an NFT collector. Go on. So I was just going to say, what he's basically made is a VR version of his mansion in LA or wherever he lives, that people can sort of walk around and they can wear certain clothes and, you know, buy these NFTs of certain clothes to walk around with. And somebody has paid nearly $500,000, so $450,000 on December the 3rd, an NFT collector, to say that they're going to live next door to Snoop Dogg in the Snoopverse. So there's some people who are really, really speculating hard on this. Presumably he either really loves Snoop Dogg or he thinks that later down the line he's going to be able to sell that for, a profit above and beyond $500,000. So there's people who are really getting into this and really putting some serious money into it. And you're always going to get stories of people who get in early and make a fortune, but there's a lot of people speculating on this, isn't there? There's a lot of people taking it very, very seriously, even though it hasn't been fully fleshed out exactly what it's going to look like.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you want to quickly kind of just Google images Snoopverse, just so that the people can see that it definitely doesn't look anything like, the Matrix. It's basically Minecraft. So he's sort of got this like sandboxed universe like Minecraft that's all a bit blocky and simple looking. And as you say, it's almost like some weird like crossover between kind of the concept of Twitter, that you can be a total nobody and actually engage in conversation with someone like Snoop Dogg, which Twitter was probably the first format that actually had total randomers talking to famous people so easily. It's probably like combining that a bit with, as you say, the kind of cryptocurrency, NFT, blockchain-y hype that's going around. Because while in one way, the idea of buying a plot of land next to Snoop in Snoopverse means nothing, because in terms of real life, that means you are literally yards from Snoop all the time and you can chat to him over the wall and bump into him all the time, as opposed to me here that has no ability to bump into someone who's thousands of kilometers away from me. But of course, in a virtual world, with a click of a mouse, you can move to anywhere you like in the entire environment. So you can be in Snoop's virtual mansion and near Snoop's virtual mansion all the time, no matter where you live.
So this is really attractive, right? Because you can hang out with celebrities, visit their homes, you can do activities that you're not capable of doing or you're too scared to do in real life, things like this. Essentially, you're putting yourself into almost a computer game / the Matrix, right? So it's very, very attractive. But I guess the point you're going to come on to is that you need to create some sort of hype and scarcity with that, right?
Yeah. And certainly, I think the only reason the valuations of this stuff are so bonkers is because it's all getting tied up with this NFT concept, that it's you're owning a token on a blockchain that is unique, and that you can sell in the future to someone else. And it doesn't matter if you or I think that the concept of having the virtual plot of land in the Snoopverse that's next to Snoop Dogg is pointless and irrelevant and we'd never own it. Like, that's only the kind of same logic as you or I saying
the Mona Lisas, what's the Mona Lisa?
I think they're crap. Yeah. It's exactly the same thing. There's loads of artwork that's worth huge amounts of money that I think is absolute garbage and wouldn't pay a penny for, that someone else would pay £1 million for. So it really is just that. It's that there are people who want to buy the concept of something.
And this seems to be where we're going, right? Because this is leaning really heavily and on the last topic that I want to come on to, which is NFTs, these non-fungible tokens, because it gives people ownership on the blockchain. You can tell who owns this thing. So just like somebody owns the original Monet, but people can make loads of copies, people like the idea of having ownership. So they've talked about things like in the Snoopverse, you could buy a particular skin, right? So you can walk around as Brad Pitt or Donald Trump or whoever you want to be, or just your own skin. And people will pay to do this because they think it's something that is intrinsically valuable, or they just like it, and they'll pay huge sums of money to do this. Obviously, to have that, you need to have some idea of ownership, and they have to have this token that tells everyone else and is verifiable that they are the owner of this set of clothes or this avatar or whatever it is in space. And this brings in this idea of non-fungible tokens. So you have to have this way of verifying ownership. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what these NFTs, these non-fungible tokens are? Because we see these, or I haven't stopped hearing about this over the last couple of months, and just pictures of people with ape heads everywhere, going mad about these non-fungible tokens. So do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
So a non-fungible token is basically a unique object that can't be easily swapped out for another one, and a simple way of declaring it the same value. So like, here's a £2 coin in the UK, and this is not a non-fungible token because there are lots and lots and lots and lots of £2 coins that are all worth exactly the same value. And I can't argue to you that this one is worth more than another one. They're all £2 coins. Whereas to give some simple examples of it's kind of NFTs, if we take that little poster you've got behind you on your, I don't know if it mirrored your left shoulder, your right shoulder, that one, perfect, of you, that little icon you'd made. What people are doing at the moment with NFTs is, let's say that you took that concept art behind you there and you made 128 versions that were all different. So that would be the only one with the blue background, yellow writing, you in that pose. And if you created 128 different versions of different color schemes, different hairstyles on you, holding different objects, and for each one you linked them with a digital signature that was registered on a blockchain, then that's the idea of the non-fungible token. And even though it can be shown to other people in the same format as like a Google Images search, you can see people's NFTs and you can download them, and you can see exactly the same image that these people own as the NFT. It's the same as me putting a print of the Mona Lisa behind me and saying, well, if you stand 10 meters away, it looks exactly the same as the real thing. But there's only one real Mona Lisa with the with the paintbrush strokes. And it's the kind of the digital equivalent of people at least thinking that they've got the equivalent of the paintbrush strokes on their version when they've paid for the real thing, as opposed to you and I just looking at the Google Images searches of someone's NFT.
So fungible means essentially, for the purpose that we're talking about, not unique. So we're talking about things like where you can replace one with another, and essentially there's no change in the situation. So pound coins, elementary particles, whatever it might be, right? You change one for another, and there's no change. But a non-fungible token will be something like a one-of-a-kind trading card, or a unique image, an autographed baseball bat, something like that. Or even, as we've seen, and it made me just kind of want to kill myself, is an individual fart that somebody has autographed. So,
that's got to be sarcasm, surely.
No, it's true.
That's unbelievable.
No, it's true. You can make NFTs of anything that is unique. So if you autograph a particular fart, apparently you can sell this on. So this is a TikTok fartrepreneur who apparently wound up in hospital with a fart-related distress from her high fiber diet. So as long as the thing is unique, you can make an NFT out of it. And some of the examples that we've seen, some of the ones you sent to me, is Grimes has sold about 6 million worth of digital art as NFTs. Somebody bought the Nyan Cat original image as an NFT. Jack Dorsey's been selling his tweets. I think he sold one for as much as $3 million after he'd autographed one of his tweets. So you can go on Twitter, look at this tweet. Look at this tweet, and it's there, and you can enjoy it or not enjoy it. But somebody can say somewhere, I have the blockchain link that tells me that I am the owner of this original Jack Dorsey pressing on Twitter. So you can make non-fungible tokens out of anything. And I guess it's mostly hype, right? People have to kind of respect that you have that ownership, and people have to care that you have that ownership, and that gives it the value. Who are we to say, like you said, that's not valuable? Because it's however much somebody's willing to pay for it, or however much value somebody decides to put into it. So one thing I had a little bit of problem with this is presumably if something's unique, and that means it's a unique object, it can be owned by an individual. You have certain control, you have certain rights over it. If I'm the owner of that fart, I can tell people who can sniff it and who can't sniff it. How do we sort of enforce that? Is there any enforcement there, or is this just sort of hype in the community? Can you control it with copyright? Say, look, here's my blockchain wallet connection to show that I'm the owner of this NFT, and somebody's using it for their profile picture. That's not appropriate. That's illegal. Has the law sort of caught up with this hype, or is it just people sitting in forums and bitching at each other for using the wrong pictures?
I think that's the sort of interesting bit in this analogy about the art versus the print all the time. So in the same way that to prove whether it's the real Mona Lisa you've got, you'd be getting the microscope out and looking at the strokes of the paintbrush on the canvas and stuff, and it's very different from looking at a print, although stand back and they look the same. As far as I understand it, you're not actually taking the copyright ownership when you purchase the NFT. You don't own the rights to reproduce it. It's that you have bought the that registration on the blockchain, which in this sort of digital world is the equivalent of being able to state, I'm the one that owns the first Mona Lisa, the one with the actual brushstrokes from Leonardo da Vinci on it. Everyone else can show you a picture of it to their heart's content, but it's just a picture of it.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best analogy I can come up with. And it's not, I don't think it is the copyright. I don't think people who own the NFT can stop other people from reproducing the image. It's that they have this warm, fuzzy feeling inside themselves that the picture hanging behind them of the woman who's not smiling is the Leonardo one, as opposed to a copy of it. I
just can't get there as that being worthwhile. But as you say, people pay, millions of pounds for the original of whatever it might be. It's particularly a piece of art. So,
well, you're talking about autograph stuff is a really good example, right?
Yeah.
So, there's probably some absolutely priceless autographed garbage. It's just that it was the last autograph that Lennon gave before he was shot. It doesn't matter that it was on a napkin that's dirty from a restaurant in New York or whatever, right? So it's very similar concept that there's always people who will think something is priceless that someone else thinks is total junk. And that's how I describe NFTs.
So this is, and I'm sure people have seen, just as we sort of come to the end of this, there seems to be these sort of what they're calling penguin communities that have grown up around these things, where people take this incredibly seriously, right? So you log on to this, what is it called here? The Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example. So a lot of people who have these NFTs, they have these pictures of apes, right, as their profile pictures. These apes.
Yeah.
I think there was a story of someone who had all their apes stolen off the blockchain a few days ago, and there was a big hoo-ha about it. But there's a lot of these penguin communities that have grown up where people take this incredibly seriously, right? If you're in this community, you can't use somebody else's NFT that you don't own as your profile picture or, as your avatar in this forum, because you're not adhering to the ownership rights of that person who wants to use that NFT. So it strikes me that there's these little sort of communities that have, very strong adherence to this thing, and it might possibly widen out and become more of an important thing on a wider scale. But at the moment, it's quite small scale. But there's always stories of people who get in at this lower level, and they're speculating that this will become, the way people own digital art, or the way people own anything. So I mean,
well, it's interesting because it reveals like this, that it kind of reveals to me, as you were relaying that these people do have this niggle in the back of their heads of like, why have I paid so much money for this?
Yeah.
And they've got this self like policing thing where it's not on to use someone else's NFT.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be copying it and using it. Whereas of course they've just bought something that is just really easy to copy and use.
Yeah.
And
so they're almost creating their own hype and then sustaining it to make, you sort of have to, now I've bought it, I better justify it and get in this community and force some people not to use my NFT, because otherwise what the hell have I paid for? I need to sort of inflate the hype now to make my early stage adoption important.
Yeah, interesting one.
Yeah, so it strikes me as kind of like an advanced version of, you must remember from school, or if you didn't do it yourself, that other people, those Panini football stickers, you remember those? Like people used to have the swaps got want need on a morning, like people will be like, I've got gigs, I haven't got marquees, and they just very, very rapidly sort of share them back and forwards, and a shiny got you 5 stickers and this kind of thing. It just strikes me as a kind of more up to date, more leveled up, more technological version of that. I don't know how you feel about that.
It's certainly a much more expensive version. That's for sure.
And this now, so now I understand this story, right? So now I understand this all my apes are gone story. So this was a story that was doing the rounds on Twitter the sort of last week. So somebody had shelled out for these NFTs of these apes, and I don't know exactly what happened, but he'd had his blockchain authorization or authentication hacked or stolen in some way, and he's just gone and lost all his pictures of apes. And apparently he had 615 bitcoins, 2.3 million worth of NFTs stolen by scammers. So if you're going to have this system and it's going to become more wide ranging, it obviously needs to be very safe. I'm not a massive authority on crypto. How do they keep these things safe and make sure that authentication, knowing that you're the one who owns this, is actually the case?
Yeah, so it's just Ethereum. So, well, you might have to click the stolen by scammers link, and it might tell you exactly what they did.
All right, okay.
It sounds like they were pretending to him to be somebody they weren't, and managed to get him to provide some
a bad NFT trader link, apparently. So I think they gave him a bad link, and he handed out his details without without
Yeah,
realizing what was
they've
going on.
managed to get his keys, because that's fundamentally it, right? If someone else basically gets your password to your wallet somehow, and you might not even be passing it over to yourself, it's if it's stored on your computer in some way and someone hacks in and takes it. So that's fundamentally what they've done. They've effectively logged in, pretending to be him, and then transferred them to their own crypto wallet. So
it just strikes me that at some level, surely you have to have some laws that govern this, right? So it seems like they all want to go sort of, a lot of anti-establishment types sort of take up this blockchain, crypto sort of line with things. But if somebody nicks your stuff and the only recourse you have is this blockchain link, surely you need to be able to go to the authorities and say, look, here's my blockchain authentication. Somebody stole all my stuff. Somebody's essentially nicked $2.3 million off me. Fix it.
Yeah.
You don't have that recourse here, right?
No, and it is hard because it depends on what kind of digital act you might have breached or not, right? So this is, in some respects, the challenge you have when internet banking, someone scams you and takes money out of your internet bank, but it's because you've accidentally given them your credentials. It's very difficult in the same way to, a lot of the time the banks will just go, well, that's your fault. And you should have been more careful not giving your credentials out to someone you didn't trust.
Yeah.
And it's depending on exactly what's happened, there's a huge difference between someone being attacked in their own home, tied up, beaten, have their fingers cut off. They then give up their password and 2.3 million goes out of their account, versus they click on a link they shouldn't have clicked on, and the credentials are nicked off their machine, or they type them into a website they shouldn't type them into. So unfortunately, it's just a bit of a tricky spectrum, depending on exactly what laws were broken in the process of the information getting taken.
So we'll have to keep an eye on this. But these, they've taken off to some extent, but they seem to be in quite, like I say, sort of localized, closed communities. We'll have to see if they really do take off. I mean, there are just as we finish this up, there are some positives of this, right? So you can support your local artist. You have this ownership. It might go up in value, so people think that it's worth speculating. And linking this back to the metaverse, these non-fungible tokens, as this metaverse expands, or some people think it will expand, you can have all of these NFTs that you can use between different environments in this. So I think someone gave the example of, like, you have a particular skin in a game that then, you can play that skin in Fortnite, and you can play that skin in Halo and whatever else game you're playing. And you can have that, and it's yours, and people know that that's you, and you own it. So as this sort of expands, people are hoping this becomes more all-encompassing, and these things only go up in value as that sort of industry rises off the ground. We'll just have to keep an eye on it and see where it goes. Do you think it's a fad, or do you think this is something that's going to keep going?
I think it's going to be as faddy as Bitcoin. It'll be around for a long time, and there'll be the same. We'll be having the same conversation about it in 10 years' time.
I know. My friend's take is, and he's usually quite good on this sort of stuff, is that it's just going to sort of descend into a money laundering usage, basically, because you have a situation where you have things of unknown value, where people can pour in a shed load of money that you don't necessarily know where it came from, or all of it came from, and then you can have other people buy those up and trade them, and then the money just gets lost and laundered, basically. So he's a little bit worried on that side of things, and as you say, that leans into how are we going to deal with these things, how are we going to regulate them, how should people interact with them. It's not really been sort of ironed out as yet.
An interesting point, because you can't think of many other things where you can just sit in front of a laptop and very quickly spend $20 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas, like, because there's a whole process of, like, buying a house, buying a plot of land, buying a yacht. Whereas this is like click, 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 click. Right, I can go back to whatever nefarious method I've just done to make all of that naughty money I've now laundered.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting point.
Exactly. So we'll keep an eye on that. Ramsey, we've done an hour and a half, so I'm gonna let you go. Is there anything else? So I promised, or I said in the description, that we would do the Martian Cannibals. I've actually grabbed a biologist to go through this next week, and Ramsey, you're more than welcome to join us. So this was a quick story that humans who go to Mars might turn into cannibals because space is such a foreboding place. Basically, I know this is one of your bugbears, that we're not sending robots, we're going to send people. So maybe something you want to join us for next time. But I'm going to do that next week now. So anyone who was
No worries.
anyone who was after Martian Cannibals, don't worry, I will be covering it in the next week or so.
I was going to segue from our Tide pod, all being geared up, ready for destroying the evidence and washing all the blood out the clothes. But yes, exactly. What do you do when the potato famine fails on Mars? You eat Kevin. Yeah, apparently that is the challenge. So
that is it.
If you send robots, it's not a problem because they eat sunlight and nuclear power.
I wonder if Alexa would recognise it as an appropriate challenge. We'll have to we'll have to ask her that. And then the final thing, Ramsey, as I ask you every time, where are the flying cars coming yet?
Oh yeah, I was hoping you were going to ask me that. Is there one more thing you'd like to think about that we haven't?
Yes.
And I was going to exactly. I did see there was a Japanese flying car knocking around.
Can we find it quickly? Japanese.
It's quick while I chat about it.
Japanese
a
car.
A nice little clip somewhere of a man with a helmet on, sitting in what looks like a drone in a car park in the startup section, the Eureka Zone.
The Eureka Zone. Is this him?
That looks plausible. Yeah, right. That's it. It's Stig.
The flying cars you see in the science fiction.
So
cool.
So yeah,
it's flying.
Yeah, more flying
and it's
cars. Cool. As always, they're both 10 years old and 10 years in the future.
Let me play it for 10 seconds. People can have a little look.
Easy to get on when it becomes self-driving. This will surprise you. There will be a lot of airports and looking forward to it will be Sky Road.
Where do they get these people who just go like mental and gesticulate so much when they're explaining something? I don't know. But so
this one doesn't tick my box as a flying car.
No,
because you can't drive that round a roundabout and then decide that you want to fly off. No. So my criteria for flying car is that it needs to be a car that flies.
I was going to say that just looks like
a toy drone with a human sat in.
Yeah, it looks like
may
just
may not fit in a garage.
A scaled up drone that somebody can sit in, right? So we're still a bit off on that. Ramsey, lots and lots of interesting stuff there. I've really enjoyed it. That's got me up to date with what the cool kids are saying on Twitter now. So I'm refreshed. What do we foresee coming up this month? Or are we just going to keep an eye on it again?
What's going on at the moment? It'll be really interesting to see what happens with the ARM NVIDIA deal. So that seems to be stalling. So we'll see if that happens because NVIDIA were trying to buy ARM and that's taking a long time to get through. There was something in my world of positioning that I'd spotted that I thought we could talk about. It's slipped my mind now. But yeah, that's the one that I'm keeping an eye on at the moment. See if that huge deal goes through or not.
Cool. Somebody's asked a question in the chat. It said, I've got a question. I am trying to purchase an NFT from this person. Which one out of these 6 would you choose if you were to buy? But then there's no images. So I guess all 6. I can't distinguish between them because I can't unfortunately see any of the images. So good luck with that. I hope it goes up in value and check back in with us next time to see if it does. Ramsey, thank you so much again for going through that with me, and let's have a chat about Martian Cannibals next week.
Cool. Cheers, Sam. Bye, everybody.
Go get your dinner. Bye, everyone. Thank you very much for coming by and watching, and we will be back soon. Bye now.